And welcome back to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, your sports talk, your one-stop sports talk, one-shop sports.
This is why people think we're stupid. That's why
Every radio show has that thing, that line that they open the show with. And they're like, pow, 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 here's a line.
We don't have
It's
it.
not that easy, especially
No.
when it's not written down.
I know.
I had that line in the first show about the rose-tinted glasses thing. I thought of that in the car on the way over.
Yeah, that was semi-clever.
That was pretty cool, I thought.
I've heard more clever, but
You are listening to Unsportsmanlike Conduct with Paul Gerke. That's me, and that's Mike McManaman. You are joining us for the second hour of our show, our first 2-hour show. We hit on a lot of stuff in the first hour. We had a call from Randy Scott, who had some opinions on the Lions preseason, the Lions forecast for the regular season. That's coming up. We talked about college football. We talked about the Big Ten's new divisions. We talked about the schedule for the Michigan Wolverines, and the Michigan State Spartans. We touched on a big game between Boise State and Virginia Tech. We've got tons more college football talk coming up. Let's start the top of the show with how you can contact us. FlintTalkRadio.com. There's a chat link. We have Facebooks. Paul Gerke and Mike McManaman. We're all over the internet.
Unsportsmanlike Conduct with Paul Gerke, Mike McManaman. Search it on Facebook or go to the Flint Talk Radio Facebook.
Mike is also in a lot of places on the internet that he doesn't want people to know that he is.
I can't tell you about those.
Mike, for the people that are just joining us at noon, tell them why you don't have your laptop today.
A Trojan virus has taken over my computer, and now I have to find the install discs. Discs is what I meant.
Yes, discs. Discs.
That would be a terrible way to restart your computer with discs.
Anyone have any guesses as to why Mike's computer doesn't work? Anybody? Call in with your opinions.
Whatever.
Let's get right into it.
How scary would that be, though, if that's how you had to reinstall your computer with discs? That would be terrifying. I would never reinstall my hard drive. What about you?
I am not going to comment.
Oh, you would? You would restart your computer like that? That's very odd.
I just hit my head on the microphone. Let's talk about college sports. USC. We talked about college football in the first half of the show.
This is a fun one.
I agree.
Talking about this one.
College football season started last night. There were a couple games on the schedule. One of them was USC. They beat Hawaii in their first game of the season. And
Is your eye all right?
I lost the contact.
Wow, tragedy.
It's in there, but I can't see out of it.
All right, keep
We're
going.
doing the second half of the show with one eye, people. USC is playing for nothing this season. In the offseason, the NCAA dropped the hammer on USC. They received a 2-year bowl ban.
Good.
Which means they can't play in the postseason. They lost 30 scholarship athletes, and they lost the rights to the 2004 national championship as a result of sanctions culminating around Reggie Bush, basically, in his Heisman Trophy winning
Mayo
season
too.
in 2004. O.J. Mayo, yeah, on the basketball side of things. USC was penalized. This is according to the Associated Press. USC was penalized for a lack of institutional control in the ruling by the NCAA following its 4-year investigation. The report cited numerous improper benefits by boosters for Bush and former basketball player O.J. Mayo, who spent just one season with the Trojans before going to the NBA. Essentially, USC is beginning a football season, and will do the same next season, where they are playing for nothing. No national championship, no conference championship, no pride, no glory. How do you motivate a team to play for nothing?
You really have to get them to drink the Kool-Aid because as an athlete, whenever you're starting off a season, the coach is constantly talking about, we got to win this championship. We got to win this. We got to win this. When you can't win anything, you really can't get motivated about anything except maybe some of these players can get excited about trying to get drafted into the NFL. But when you can't win anything, I mean, what's there to get excited about when you can't, at the end of the season, come home with whatever jug they want to come home with? What is there to get excited about? As an athlete, you really can't get pumped up about that. You can say that. You can say that you can still get excited about it. But a lot of these, I'm surprised that a lot more players have left the school. You think they would. If they're real competitors, if you told somebody like a Michael Jordan that he couldn't win a championship when he was playing basketball, or if you ask any of these top flight athletes who are super competitive, if they couldn't win a championship on a team, they'd leave immediately. They'd find anything they do to leave. You don't want to be a part of a team that can't. At intramural basketball, when we play intramural basketball, I'm always a little disappointed at the end of the season.
Because we don't win.
Not only because we don't win, But imagine if there was like a playoff, or if there was something that we could actually strive to win. You don't win anything; you just play. And sometimes that's good. That's like a pickup game and stuff. But when
Right.
you're an ultra competitive person like you and I, you would wish that there was something we could win, even if it was something stupid and small.
Right, that's true. Pete Carroll jumped ship.
Yeah,
Pete Carroll, now the
he
coach of
got
the
out.
Seattle Seahawks,
Yeah.
he knew this was coming and he bailed.
Yeah, because he went to the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, in years past, I'm sure he could have got better jobs in the Seattle Seahawks. I guess he likes the West Coast, but
Well, 2 years ago, everyone was saying that Pete Carroll's never going to go back to the NFL because he's got it made at USC. He's got
and
a
he
pedigree
did.
of quarterbacks, Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, Mark Sanchez, these guys that are just holding the fort down and winning championships.
boosters paying off athletes.
God. Well, he's got it made over there, though. And people said Pete Carroll will never have an excuse to leave. Well, now Pete Carroll's gone, and everyone kind of raised their eyebrows. And then these sanctions come down in early June and shut down the program, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take the field on Saturdays, and you have to go out and play football. They're still nationally ranked, which is the funny thing. It's like, why even rank them? They're 14th in the nation, and they beat Hawaii last night, so they could probably go up a spot or two. You still have to take the field. Mike, you've played more professional styled sports than I have. I mean, Mike played basketball at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids. You played, varsity sports in high school.
That's
You
why
dealt.
that's why he favors Notre Dame.
That's right.
Yeah, that's why he favors Notre Dame. We got the answer.
That's right. You dealt with a lot of coaches. How do you, as a coach, or you as a player, respond to a season where you're not playing for anything?
I have no idea. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to get pumped up about it. Even when I played for Davison basketball, it was a pipe dream to be the Big Nine champions. But that's always what you strive for. You still strive for that, and that's what you talk about. That's the ultimate goal. I don't know what you get excited about. I guess you just have to try to get excited about just being able to play football. You have to be excited about possibly being drafted. You have to be excited to improve, and then maybe some of these freshmen, sophomores can be like, well, in a few years we'll have an opportunity to play.
Right.
And we need to improve now. We need to keep the program going. We need if we start, not caring, then in a few years when the bowl sanctions are done with, then we're not going to have a team.
So you become martyrs in a way.
That's about the best you can do, I guess. I don't know I don't know how to get pumped up about that. Maybe some people could write in and how they would get excited for a season where they can't win anything.
Chuck pipes in on the Flint Talk radio chat. Jordan didn't win for 7 years, and he didn't leave the Bulls.
But he had the opportunity to win a championship with the Bulls. They don't have an
Right.
opportunity. Like, obviously, even the worst teams, are motivated by the possibility that they might somehow win a championship. That's how you get excited as an athlete.
Well, what do you do at the end of the season when the Big Nine championship, let's say in high school, is out of reach? How do you motivate yourself to play the game?
Well, then you have the playoffs, and that's how you get excited. You're like, well, maybe we can be state champions. It was a pretty far off
A pipe dream.
When I played for Aquinas, it was like, you have to win that WAC championship, and then we're going to nationals.
Right.
And then we're going to try to win there.
Anything.
And everything we do is for the WAC championship or for being national champions. That's what you strive for. If we were just playing for just fun, I mean, that would have been okay too, but it would have been a different situation. A lot of those players come there because they're super competitive, and because a lot of those players came to USC expecting to win a national championship. That's
Right.
why a lot of them pick that school. That's why a lot of these athletes pick certain football programs, because they have a clout and they have an expectation that they will at least compete for one of those upper echelon bowl games or for a national championship.
Where do you see the USC program in 5 years? Do you think they're going to have a significant fall off because of this, or do
No.
you think they're going to recover?
I think they'll be fine. It's USC. It's Southern California. It's still USC football, and I think that the way they've been playing for the last, few years, will take them.
They're still a very good team, which is funny to me because if I were a senior in that football program, I would have jumped ship, saved my last year of eligibility, and gone and played anywhere else, basically.
I would have too.
Because you're losing the stigma of Pete Carroll that he left there. I guess stigma has a negative connotation, but you're losing the sort of aura, the winning attitude that was left there by the dynasty of a program set up by Pete Carroll. And now you're going to play your senior year for nothing? I mean, you've been preparing for this for 3-4 years in college, and you're going to leave empty-handed. I guess I would just take off. I'd go to the highest bidder, Virginia
Yeah.
Tech, you want me? great. Ohio State, you need a linebacker or whatever position I'm playing in this hypothetical.
Well, I mean, if you're a senior and you're not going to go to the NFL, then it doesn't really matter
Yeah,
because you
maybe.
just
I guess that's
want
the
to
case.
graduate and you don't want to take another year off and not move on with your life. But if you want to be drafted, you still.
But in that argument, I guess you could stay at USC too, because USC is still a high-profile program.
Yeah.
And you could have a big year against big opponents, and maybe that looks even better.
That's why I don't think a lot of players are going to leave. I could see some of maybe the freshmen and sophomores leaving because they're just so disappointed and they feel
and they're
cheated.
sort of impatient. They're younger.
Yeah.
They don't want to wait.
But once you're there, you've been in the program for a few years. You have some kind of respect for the program, even though they've done some disrespectful things to the program. But you want to just keep that up and keep up the tradition and say, I played all 4 years at USC, and even when this happened, I was dedicated to them.
That's
so
true.
That's part of it too.
And I guess NFL scouts would really look highly upon that too. A guy that was going to come into a losing program, let's say the Lions,
Yeah.
and still stick with the team even though they're bad.
Yeah.
If you want to weigh in on the USC topic or any other topic that we've touched on so far, we've talked about the Lions preseason, their predictions for the NFL season, which starts next Sunday. We talked about college football, the Big Ten's new divisions. If you want to weigh in on what you think the Spartans or the Wolverines are going to do this season, we'd love to hear from you. The number is 810-208-1854. We're going to get into our big topic, Mike. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
This is something we've been pumping up on Facebook all week, and thank you to our 270-some-odd Facebook followers. We really appreciate the love you've given us. Thanks to John Wilson. Thanks to Steve Myers and the guys that have been helping us promote. We talked about this on Facebook all week. Should college athletes be paid for their services? Mike, I'm going to let you get the first word in on this one, and then it's going to turn into a debacle.
I think there's so many problems with it that you can't pay the athletes. It's a novel thought. I mean, they do Michigan, like for example, Michigan football players would bring in a lot of money. But then where do you draw the line? Do you start paying all the athletes that are on the field hockey team? Do they get the same amount? Is there going to be a cap set up for how much you pay the players?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the scholarship already enough? They're getting, when you go to one of these big schools, it's like $30,000 a year. You're already getting paid that much. I know there's some type of stipend, but maybe you increase the stipend so it's more.
Let me interject. Not all athletes are on a scholarship, and some aren't on a full scholarship too. Not all athletic scholarships
That's
are full
true.
scholarships, and there are some walk-ons that really make a difference in these programs, and they are not getting paid for their services. I think that that's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe one way to alleviate the situation is just to give all athletes of every sport athletic scholarships. Or is that too biased to people that get into the school legitimately because of good grades and because of good ACT and SAT scores?
That's bias, and there's only something like 14 Division I schools that are actually making money off their athletic programs. You have to fund so many programs when you have a major college like that to make it fair with Title IX and various other things. I mean, you have things like field hockey teams and just obscure sports that don't make money and will never make money, but you have to have them.
Well, cheerleaders too. I mean, cheerleaders.
Cheerleaders.
Is a contentious thing too. About
Yeah.
is it considered a sport or not?
Yeah, and
I would say it's not a sport, but maybe that's
they're
another
probably
issue for
some of them are
another day.
probably on scholarship though. Do you give those
Do they give
people money?
scholarships for cheerleaders?
I think they do. I don't know.
If anyone can answer that question, hook us up in the chat or call in 810-208-1854. I don't think that, first of all, I don't think cheerleading is a sport. I think it's a competition, which is not hating on cheerleading. And I think it's a nice part of the tradition for football and basketball games, et cetera. But I don't know if they get athletic scholarships or not. You talked about Title IX a second ago. Mike, on our Unsportsmanlike Conduct Facebook page, Michael Adams pipes in. Better question is, if yes, do you pay both male and female athletes for all sports? You brought up the all sports part. What about male and female athletes? Do they receive the same amount?
See, that would, if you are going to pay the athletes, then you have to do some kind of system where the most prominent programs are paid more of the athletes from those programs. For example, I'm sure the women's UConn basketball team and the Tennessee women's basketball team bring in a good chunk of change. Probably even more than UConn's football team. But how do you make that uniform? Do you go by program? How much? I mean, it would be such a complex system of how much money do you give, and is it just a stipend, or are they going to get paid, like $30,000 a year? Do you pay them monthly? There's so many things going on. Do you pay every athlete? Do you pay the water boy? Do you pay the guy that's eighth string on the practice
squad? You don't
squad?
pay the water boy. You pay everybody on the team. And here's my
The
method.
same amount, or do you?
Yep, here's my method. That way you're not showing bias to the big wide receiver recruit and the second string offensive lineman. Here's what I say you do. I say you give every athlete for every team. Okay, let me backtrack. Scholarships, the scholarship system we can leave as it is. Some have athletic scholarships, some don't. I say you give every athlete a percentage of the amount of revenue that sport is bringing in. So if you have a big, high-profile college football program, they get a percentage, a set percentage, every player, okay? And now I want there to be a cap at some point for the amount a player can receive. So let's say, like, for example, Michigan is in their prime a couple years ago. You know, national championship competitors. They're bringing in tons of money, hundreds of thousands of people packing the big house, okay? There's a percentage cap as to how much each player can receive. So it's not an astronomical amount. And then it goes down from there. Okay, so there's also going to be a basement cap as well. So you're not going to pay the field hockey players 3 cents because they're not bringing in fans.
They're probably losing money. So do you make them pay you, though? I
No,
mean, if you do this business model, you're going to lose a lot of money. And there's only something like, we can pull it up. I don't know where the study's at. 14 athletic programs that are making money. The rest of them are hemorrhaging money because of all these extra sports teams and all this money they have to invest. I'm sure teams like probably Michigan is probably up there on with a profit and stuff like that. But how do you tell these this is going to hurt those smaller schools, because if they have to start paying every athlete, how are they going to fund all these programs? How are they going to justify doing this? You're going to take away a lot of scholarships because a lot of these colleges won't be able to afford it.
Right.
I mean, you already give so much to these athletes. And I could totally understand why a player from like Michigan or USC football player would feel like, I'm being cheated. My name is being used. And
They're
I'm not
generating
being
money
compensated.
for the school.
Yeah.
They're showing up in video games. Now, granted, not with their names, but with their likenesses, with their uniform numbers and their
Are you
height
an
and
amateur
weight.
athlete anymore if you're being paid? That's why you have to call it a stipend and just expect that. And maybe you increase the stipend on some of the bigger schools and stuff like that. But you're getting into a dangerous practice where there's already so many problems with boosters and stuff like that. I mean, where are you going to draw the line?
According to Old Friend, who just piped into the Flint Talk Radio chat room, he says, if you break down that income to every player in an athletic program in the school, male and female, you'll be handing out all of your income. Old Friend, I agree with you. And Mike, I guess I didn't think about that, especially with the smaller schools. So maybe you do this. Is this too biased, this plan right here? Pay the football and basketball players.
Yeah, that's too biased. You'll have so many problems. You'll hear so many people up in arms with them.
College baseball doesn't generate a lot of revenue. College hockey, there's not a whole lot of competitive college hockey teams. They don't generate a lot of revenue either. Pay the basketball players, pay the football players.
That's more problems than it's worth. You're going to get so many people up in arms and so many groups up in arms. And right now there's only a few people angry. There's a select few that are angry that college athletes aren't getting paid. And they haven't stopped playing sports because their likeness is being used. They're not going to stop playing.
Right.
So the colleges have the upper hand here in not paying the athletes.
That's true.
It's more of a thing that is good to talk about.
Let's take away the logistics from it and just say, as a former college athlete, do you think they deserve to get paid? Tom on our Facebook page says, yes, they spend so much time being fit to stay healthy. They don't have time to work, which is another topic. They don't have time to work outside of school like some of these other collegiate athletes, or I guess people that aren't athletes. They have jobs outside of school. These people don't have time to work. Tom also says they're not paid millions. They shouldn't be paid millions, rather, but for sure they should not have to worry about money.
When I was on academic and athletic, my athletic was not enough to pay for all my school. Mm-hmm. I felt like I should be paid something more, a stipend. I was at a smaller school, so I didn't get that. But when you dedicate 5 or 6 hours at least a day to something, that's like a job. That's what it was.
That's true.
But in another sense, I was only getting something like $3,000 for it, so it was slave labor. But I don't think that I understand why you can't pay me. The schools have to remain profitable, and I guess maybe you increase tuition. You could increase tuition.
That's
an
even more slippery slope. I don't want to talk about increasing tuition.
I don't think it's a good idea to pay athletes.
I got an idea. Maybe how about some of them? The bigger colleges. They're already got celebrity status. How about them getting for funds from personal appearances and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you run into the problem with boosters too, John. I mean, there's a lot of boosters that have been paying off athletes. That's why USC got into all this trouble and they're losing their bowl eligibility because these players are getting paid. They are getting cars. They
Yeah.
are getting cushy jobs where they're given the opportunity to make money for no work at all, really.
And would paying them stop that? I don't think it would.
No, I don't think it would either, but maybe it would discourage it a little more, or maybe it would sort of make it okay. Let's stop that talk for just a second and say, are you all right with boosters giving money to high-profile recruits?
No, that's wrong.
Why?
Because that's not the point of boosters. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be paid off. The reason you pick a school is for the academics and for the clout of the program, and just because you want to play football. You're never supposed to be paid off. That's dirty money.
That makes sense in your glass half full world, but that's not the way things work. I mean, USC wanted O.J. Mayo. USC wanted Reggie Bush. They fought for them to make it what the program has become. Look at what USC is now. USC basketball was a dot on the map, essentially, at one point. But once they recruited O.J. Mayo, they were suddenly something. And even though they had recruiting violations, even though they're paying for it now, you can't argue that their program isn't better because they paid off O.J. Mayo and Reggie Bush.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if I was a player and I was getting paid off, but it doesn't mean it's right. It's still wrong. It's very wrong. That shouldn't happen. And more crackdowns need to happen because this happens a lot more than just USC. I mean, nobody believes that USC is the only program that does this.
No,
they just got
absolutely
caught.
not. Yeah, that's true.
I'm sure every major program, does this to some degree.
Alex on our Facebook page says, if college athletes get paid for participating in athletic competitions, I think students should get paid for doing Formula SAE. Those students spend a lot of time working on that project. The fact is that college athletes are playing because they want to play, and they already get scholarships as it is. Other extracurricular activities don't pay students to participate, so why should athletics be any different? Alex, what I'll say, arguing your point, is some things earn money, some things don't earn money. College athletics, to some degree, especially when it gets down to March Madness and college basketball, as well as college football, those things are a business.
Yeah.
And their activities second, a business first.
I think another point he made was some of this research that these research graduates do does make a lot of money.
Yeah,
But
he says, I bet student-conducted research brings in a lot of money and recognition for MIT, so maybe we should pay graduate students that conduct research while monetarily benefiting the
you do
college.
to some degree.
Yeah.
From the programs I've researched, because I was thinking about going to grad school, you get your tuition paid for if you're one of these research assistants,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get something like a stipend of $15,000, which I think is probably along the lines of what one of these
part-time job would be, too.
But I think
Yeah.
some of these athletes, they get a stipend. I don't know the degree and if it's the same for every school. That'd be something I'd have to do more research on. But I understand why a lot of these players feel cheated. I just don't think there's anything you can do about it.
I don't think that these athletes, I guess now that I think about it, that are participating in activities, like you said, like field hockey or like the college bowling team,
Yeah.
they shouldn't be paid. I mean, they're not going to stop playing because they're not being paid.
Yeah.
They just like to bowl, or they
Yeah.
just like to play field hockey.
Yeah.
Or they
Yeah.
just like co-ed softball.
And that's what sports should be about. Just, I mean, when
these
you
people-
when you play field hockey, when
They're not
you're
gonna be a pro
football
field
player,
hockey player.
Yeah, when you're a football player, sometimes it's a little bit more because you want to make it a career.
it's high profile.
But there's no option to be a professional field hockey. We could start that up, maybe.
You said a second ago that you believe college athletes deserve to be paid. Is that true?
Yeah,
But they just can't be paid.
they
because
just
they're
can't be paid.
monetary.
I think as much time as they dedicate and as much money as some of these higher flight athletes bring in, they should be paid, but they can't be paid because of all the other programs that have to be funded.
Let us know what you think. The number's 810-208-1854. You are listening to Unsportsmanlike Conduct with Paul Gerke and Mike McManaman. You can join us on the chat page of flinttalkradio.com. We are in the middle of a heated discussion regarding whether or not college athletes should be paid for their services.
I think when you're on full scholarship, I can understand not getting paid, but there's a lot of that's not the majority of players.
Right.
A majority of players are getting something like only like $3,000 or $4,000. They're getting a very small portion of their tuition paid for, and I'm sure those athletes wish that they could have a job on the side, but they can't. They have to dedicate so much time, and it's so tough sometimes. I remember I was struggling because I didn't have a job. And I need, you still need money even though you're an athlete.
the world still keeps spinning, and you
Yeah.
still need to buy food, and
Yeah.
you need to buy gas.
So I got a question. How is the athletic scholarship? How is that money raised? That's from the alumni associations or what?
Yeah, and I think part of the money comes from the money they generate with college athletics. Now, when Mike says that only 14 programs are raising money or in the black, so to speak, I think that's because a lot of them are paying out scholarships to recruit athletes, and that comes out of that same monetary
And they're
pool.
getting money, I think, from tuition and stuff. And the NCAA has certain rules on how many scholarships you can give out and stuff like that.
And that's what one of the big things was with USC is they lost 40 scholarships, which is a huge number.
Yeah.
And that's going to really affect their ability to bring in recruits because big-time players want at least a partial scholarship. And, you brought up you struggled as a partial scholarship athlete. What about the walk-ons? What about the guy that's really good at a sport that gets no love in high school? He's not recruited, but he shows up the
You
first
have to
day
have
of
a rich
training camp
family.
and blows up. Yeah.
You have to have a rich family because you still need to eat. You still need to go out and do things.
You
and pay for
definitely
your
can't have a
gas.
job, and you're getting none of your tuition paid. You're essentially the bitch of that athletic program. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where I really think they should be paid. What if you just paid walk-on athletes?
That's a slippery
That would
slope, too.
discourage the teams from signing walk-on athletes,
Yeah.
essentially. They wouldn't want to let those guys on the squad because then they'd have to pay them.
Yeah.
Matt, who's a big friend of the show, says, players are nothing without the coaches, the team, and the campus benefits. They are getting paid in experience, future opportunities, and being the kings of campus and getting a free education. That's not always true, Matt, but no one pays to see a number one recruit. They pay to see the tradition of a team like U of M. If you doubt the benefit of a full-ride scholarship, perhaps you're gifted enough to start paying my student loans.
I can understand that point.
I think you're
completely
missing something though there, Matt. I think honestly, tradition is great. I think that's one of the 10 reasons that someone will pick a school.
I think if you're an athlete, that gives you a heads up in the job market too. You can put that. I played on the USC football team or something like that.
That's a
and
big
that
resume
will help.
post.
But when you're at one of these other schools, it's not like every athlete is playing for Michigan is on full scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. There's a lot of schools, smaller schools, athletes. We're not talking just about Division I programs. We're talking about Division II. We're talking about Division III. We're talking about all kinds of things here, and those athletes are struggling. There's a lot of athletes that struggle, and there's a lot of players that have to drop out and can't live their dream because they're not getting. I knew another guy that had to leave basketball when I was playing because he had to have another job. He couldn't support just playing basketball because he wasn't getting full scholarship, and that's unfortunate.
Derek, another big fan of the show, says he agrees with Matthew to a degree. Their scholarship is the equivalent of a contract. And scholarships are usually in designated percentages according to how good of a player you were coming out of high school. Though I do recognize that it sucks that a Division I program can make just as much as an NFL team when it comes to ticket sales, yet universities are getting free/very cheap labor. Yeah, that's true. That's the real argument for why college players should get paid is they're providing a free service and getting exploited by universities.
It's not necessarily free though. You're getting tuition paid for, and not everybody.
In some cases.
Yeah, in a lot of cases. But when you're a walk-on, I mean, that's obviously not, and not everybody's getting a full scholarship. A lot of them are getting partial.
That's true. If you'd like to pipe in on this conversation and discuss whether or not college athletes should be paid, the number is 810-208-1854. Matt continues to say, if you pay young student athletes money, you're asking for trouble. Enough athletes think they're the man before their time and waste their talent on partying and being idiots. Now you want to give them cash on top of all the perks that already go to an immature young man's head. Tell me how much a college coach will control a 17 or 18-year-old wide receiver who is being cut a check and a tuition. Talk about head cases. I don't think that ego really comes into that. I'm not talking about paying these people millions of dollars. I'm not talking about making them the big man on campus because they can afford to go buy kegs with their college football money. I'm talking about paying them enough so that they can buy their rice-a-roni and they can buy their gasoline and they can buy their pack of cigarettes that gets them through the week because these people are still...
I hope they're not smoking if they're a college athlete.
These people are still...
Sound Vlade Divac.
College students. These people still have schedules. They still have classes on top of Rich Rod's NCAA extravaganza where you're practicing 7 days a week, 15 hours a day.
I'd have to know more about the stipend because I know some schools, I think, have stipends, but not all these athletes are on stipends. I know that a lot of the smaller schools don't do stipends, and you're just expected to have a rich family that'll take care of you.
I think that without paying the college players, I think that really gives, like you said, players without a rich family, it puts them behind the eight ball before they even begin their career because they just can't compete.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard is it to go to practice knowing that you should be working at a pizza place or something. You know what I mean? I mean, you need that money. You need to bring it in somehow. And if mom and dad can't provide it for you, how can you expect to compete? How can you expect to keep a competitive level head?
Yeah.
Matt also says the kids have school, books, food, and other things paid for. What more do they need? I don't think that that's the case.
Not in all cases. In some cases, yeah. In some cases,
But isn't that illegal if they're buying their books and stuff for them? Like, doesn't that fringe
not
on the
necessarily.
booster illegality?
Not necessarily, because you can have tuition over, like, you can get more scholarship than is necessary. I knew somebody about that when I went to school that got more than, they got money back. They got a check back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just enough to pay for their books and stuff like that. But to some degree, that's okay.
Joyce pipes in on the Facebook. Why should they get paid? They're in college to get an education, right?
That's
part of it.
That's
but
part of it.
College athletics is more than, I mean, that's what generates money for the college.
In that case, then nobody's gonna be able to play sports because
I agree. We agree to disagree to some degree. I think that college athletes should get a percentage cut. There should be some sort of salary cap, if you will. Old dude rejoins the chat and says, loans. Lots of college students do this. Yeah, that's why I'll be paying college loans until I'm 50 years old, because of loans. And I'm not a college athlete. I have a job.
Yeah.
And I'm screwed either way. I don't know. Do you really think a college athlete should get themselves in that sort of financial debt? Because they're going to be taking out more loans than me. I'm going to be $50K in the hole by the time it's said and done. And I'm not paying student loans, you know?
Yeah, everybody has to pay loans. And I guess if you weren't an athlete, you wouldn't feel like that was fair, that they were. But in another sense, they can't get a job. You really can't get a job in that case.
We can move on from this topic. If you'd like to pipe in, you can do it on the Flint Talk radio page. There's a chat link at the very top. You can get in on the chat. There are 5 people in here, including Old Dude, who is talking with John right now, who's running the board back there about the topic at hand. You can also call us, 810-208-1854. We'd love to hear from you. We can reset the show a little bit. We were talking Lions preseason. Mike seems to think the Lions are just going to lay an egg, if you will, in the upcoming season. I think the Lions could be 7-9 or 8-8.
5-11.
Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. We also think that Michigan is going to just bomb their Big Ten schedule. We think that they're going to be competitive for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season playing powder puff teams, but they're going to fall apart when it comes time to play the big boys like OSU, like Iowa, Ricky Stanzi and his Iowa squad. We think that MSU is going to be competitive, maybe start the season as well as 7-1 before losing a couple of games in a row, maybe blowing that game against Minnesota late in the season, seeing as they always seem to lose a game they have no business losing. We all talked a little bit about Boise State and Virginia Tech, about why Boise State is maybe committing suicide, preseason suicide with their scheduling against Virginia Tech early in the season. Not to make a suicide joke about Virginia Tech, but USC playing for 0 this season. We talked about that a little bit. If you'd like to pipe in on any of those topics, you know the number. I've said it enough times. I'd like to talk a little bit about the NHL collective bargaining agreement, the NHL CBA. I'm a big hockey fan. I like to get a little hockey and a little puck into every show. Ilya Kovalchuk has been a subject of discussion during this NHL offseason. He was a former forward of the Atlanta Thrashers, where he thrived for a couple seasons. He was acquired at the trade deadline last year by the New Jersey Devils, who were expected to make a playoff run with him and sort of failed miserably at that. It's no fault of Kovalchuk, really. He thrived in the Devils jersey. But Ilya Kovalchuk just signed a 17-year contract with the New Jersey Devils. All they had to do was get okayed by the NHL, and they shot it down.
Yeah.
They said it was ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
There have been a couple ridiculous contracts over the last few seasons since the NHL adopted a salary cap policy. What do you think, Mike, about exceptionally long-term contracts? We're talking, let's say, 10 years and more. What does that do to the game? Well, circumventing the salary cap, essentially. Because in case you don't understand the way the salary cap works, the length of the contract, like let's say, for example, you have a 10-year, $50 million contract, okay? It's divided up and averaged out. So the salary cap hit for a team in a given season will be $5 million in that contract. But the way they're circumventing the salary cap is you're making an astronomical deal, like let's say a 15-year deal, where the player's already, 30 years old, and they're not going to play 15 more years in the league. And they're front-loading the contract. So you're saying, listen, we're going to give you $10 million next season in your prime. and then we're going to load the last 7 years of the deal at $1 million apiece. So what you're doing is you're paying the player the money they want now in their prime, and they're never going to live out the duration of that contract, and you're circumventing the way the salary cap works, so you're only taking a smaller hit every season. What do you think that does to the integrity of the game?
Maybe you get rid of this whole salary cap thing. Maybe you have to do that. Or you can just keep cracking down like they're doing now, but you're going to have to keep doing that because all these teams are going to try to find a way around it. They're all going to try to take advantage of the system because they all want to win. I think maybe you just get rid of the salary cap again. Let the Detroit Red Wings load up on all the great players again. Maybe that's all right for the league.
I'm going to get into the Ilya Kovalchuk contract in a second. The Chris Pronger, this came down yesterday, the Chris Pronger deal with the Philadelphia Flyers, which was signed when he was 35 years old, was accepted under the NHLPA's revision policy yesterday. 7 years, $34.45 million contract. It's got him playing until he's 42. Chris Pronger, for those of you who don't know, is a physical defenseman. He's not going to play into his 40s, more than likely. He only makes $525,000 in his last 2 seasons. This is a perennial all-star, a guy that deserves to be paid more than the veterans minimum, but they front-loaded his contract to make him happy.
Here's part of it, though. That's just Chris Pronger, and that's only 7 years. So when the casual fan hears that, or they don't hear 17 years. When you hear 17 years, you're like, how in the world does somebody sign a 17-year contract? So people are talking about that.
Right.
But the Chris Pronger thing, if you weren't a big hockey fan like you would have never heard about it. I wouldn't have heard about it. But when you hear like 25 years, you're like, that's not even possible. What's the NHL doing?
Right. I think the first big contract that I ever remember hearing, and I remember, you know how everyone says they remember where they
Islanders?
were? Yeah, it was Rick DiPietro. You
Yeah.
remember where you were when Princess Diana died?
No, I remember when Mike Tyson bit off Evander
Holyfield's
Holyfield's
here.
ear.
Okay,
I remember that
our
moment.
generation has a whole bunch of moments like that, like our parents' generation had JFK and things like that. I remember where I was when I heard that Rick DiPietro signed a 15-year deal with the New York Islanders. It was in 2006. I was at my apartment. I was attending Grand Valley State at the time. I was skipping class, watching ESPN, probably eating Pop-Tarts. I'm a big Pop-Tart sympathist, for those of you not in the know. But anyway, DiPietro signed a 15-year deal, $67.5 million contract. It was, at the time, the longest official NHL contract ever to be signed, only to be surpassed by this 17-year debacle that is the Ilya Kovalchuk deal. This was the very first one of these. Now, these didn't catch on. They didn't become trendy until maybe this past offseason, a year ago. And now it seems like that's the norm in the NHL. That was the most absurd deal. And Rick DiPietro, it's had a history with injuries. He's a goalie for the Islanders. I don't think he's played a single full season since he signed that contract. So that was just an absolute waste of money by the Islanders. But now it's becoming the norm. And the NHL salary cap, maybe you say, is a little too low. You can't play the veteran.
Yeah.
You can't pay veteran players in their prime enough money to stick around.
I understand why they do it.
Is that the problem?
The NHL just isn't as profitable as it was in the 90s. They want to have a salary cap. I understand that.
I like the cap in the NHL. I think that
I do too, but they have to find a way, and maybe you know of a better way to do this because this is going to keep happening. They're going to keep trying to sign these absurd contracts.
the players' union is going to have problems when the NHL, in their suits, say you can't sign a player to this money.
Yeah.
That's what unions are for. I totally respect that. But I think what the NHL is doing here is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's bad that they're going back and revising previous contracts. You can't say, well, now the rules are different. Sorry, Chris Pronger, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I think you maybe make a policy now. Gary Bettman needs to put pants on for the first time in his freaking tenure as commissioner of the NHL and say, listen, I know what you're all doing. I understand why you're doing it, but it's not going to happen. Yeah. Roger Goodell is a disciplinarian in the NFL. He runs a tight ship. Bettman needs to learn to do that now and say, this is where we draw the line. We're rejecting this Kovalchuk contract for a number of reasons, and we're going to keep doing it. So don't even try. Don't try to put one past me. We're talking about all these other big contracts. Kovalchuk now, it's a 15-year, $100 million contract, was the latest one submitted to the NHL. They're thinking that one's going to be accepted, which is, it was 17 years, 102, I think was the original that was rejected. Now 15, 100. I mean, that's a slight difference, but it's still just an absurd contract.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
We've talked about this before. What do you think the NHL needs to do to be back in prominence? To get back, do they even need to do that, or do they need to just be focused on the Midwest space? What do they need to do to get back to where they were at? We've always had this discussion. We haven't talked about it yet, but I think and I think even casual NHL fans are interested in hearing about what the NHL can do to actually I've seen some good things over the last few years. With
Yeah,
some of the versus stuff.
I agree. There's some things the NHL can do. This is a long topic, but I'll hit on a couple things for you, Mike. What they've done with the outdoor game with NBC has been huge. For
Oh,
the
great!
league.
I watched the January 1st, the first one they did in Pittsburgh in
Buffalo, I believe, was a part of
Buffalo.
the first one.
Okay, yeah, that was
It
fascinating.
was snowing. Crosby
I
scored a
watched
game
that
winner
over
in a
the-
shootout. Yeah.
I think they had the Rose Bowl on. I was over watching that instead. It was great
I think
TV.
competing with college football bowl games is a mistake. Maybe you move the date.
I think you keep that one, but maybe do another game too.
They're doing 2 this season. They're getting Canadian teams involved for the first time. I believe the Flames are playing the Canadians. I think what they've done with the outdoor game is great for the league, great for exposure. It's easy to promote. I think their ad campaigns with NBC have been pretty solid. Versus, I think, is holding you back. But I read something yesterday that might change all that. For those of you not in the know, Versus has been purchased by Comcast, or there's some sort of debacle involving Versus and Comcast, where NBC is now going to own Versus. NBC, from what I hear, the preliminary reports are they're going to turn Versus into the NBC Sports Network, essentially,
okay.
and they're just going to call it as such. They're going to lose the Versus brand name.
That's a good idea.
NBC has a much bigger brand name than Versus.
Yeah.
And I think that would do wonders for the NHL. But I think
get it in more homes. Too.
I
don't
agree.
think Versus is in a lot of
well,
homes.
especially with the debate they've had with different cable systems, and they don't want to pay because Versus wants to charge them an astronomical fee.
Are they still going to keep NHL games on the NBC network?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay,
that will be
that
their
was-
big draw. They're going to
Okay.
try to turn it into a sports network centered around the NHL
Okay.
and what Versus is already doing for coverage.
That's excellent.
But I think as far as what the NHL needs to do to get into more homes, I think the NHL needs to get back on ESPN. Even if you have to crawl back and beg and say, please, Barry Melrose, please, Darren Pang, please, John Buccigross, give me NHL Tonight back.
People are still fascinated by Barry Melrose. Even
He's
if
still an icon, even
I know.
years removed from having a show regarding hockey on
it's
ESPN.
fascinating.
If the NHL gets back on ESPN, I think you'll see a big resurgence because ESPN knows how to promote. Look at the ABC family of networks. Look at what you saw last year with the NBA Finals. Look at the way they promote NBA teams in their coverage. I mean, their ad campaigns are just incredible.
Yeah.
They give you goosebumps if you don't know anything about the NBA.
Versus had a few good ones with like Steve
Versus has
Yzerman,
had a couple good
Bobby
ones.
Hall.
I'll give them that. The Cup Rays won 2 years ago, and last year, what was the name of the campaign? I don't remember the name of it,
Yeah.
but it was tremendous. I'll give Versus that. Some of their playoff advertising
Do
campaigns
you
have been
think
solid.
that they need to cut down on the number of teams? Do you think they need to get away from the West Coast for a little while and maybe bring it back in a few years if they get more popular?
I have been a strong advocate of contraction since the lockout, basically.
Yeah.
I think the NHL would be fine with 24 teams.
Yeah.
There's 30 right now. I would be fine with a 20-team league. Maybe I'm too much of a fan of 80s style hockey.
Would the players' union be okay with that though? Would
No,
they fight
absolutely
that?
not. Yeah, they'd fight it. But you got to think there's a whole bunch of franchises now that are losing money. A couple years ago it was a big deal because the Phoenix Coyotes were hemorrhaging cash. They filed for bankruptcy in the middle of a season. There's like 6 teams now that were in the red last year, including Canadian markets, if you believe that. The Ottawa Senators lost money last season. And Ottawa's the capital of Canada. If you think hockey, everything's Canada, Canada, Canada. The Senators lost money last year. And it's not because they're a terrible team. I mean, Daniel Alfredson, and there was a sort of a resurgence with Patrick Lalime last year, and Ray Emery coming back from overseas. He ended up in Philadelphia. But I guess the Senators are still a good team, yet they lost money. I think a 20-team league would be great for the NHL. If you made it a 24-team league, I'd be fine with that. I think you need to lose West Coast markets. There's no reason for the Phoenix Coyotes to still
San
be in the
Jose's
NHL.
got a pretty solid fan
They
base.
do. I'm not saying take away all the West Coast teams, but I think you need to move things back towards the Midwest and the East. You'd hate to take away any Canadian teams. I don't want to lose Calgary or Edmonton, and they're out on the West Coast. Maybe you give Hamilton a team. You take the team away from Phoenix or move them back to Winnipeg, which would be fine with me. I think you maybe get rid of the Carolina team, maybe move it back to Hartford. I mean, go old school with it, because look at when the NHL was thriving. It's back when you had these teams that have since moved to West Coast cities.
When they had the glow puck.
That's not when the NHL was thriving. Don't bring the glow puck up in
I
front
love
of
the
me.
glow puck.
Another team, the LA Kings. What have the LA Kings been since Gretzky left?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if the LA Kings were gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody would miss the LA Kings. I think you need to focus on states like Minnesota, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, the Midwest where hockey thrives. You've got people that can actually play the sport during the winter. I think the West Coasters are really bringing the teams in the NHL
I
down,
agree.
and the revenue sharing is suffering as such. We're talking about the NHL a little bit. We can still get back to college athletes if you'd like to get in and call. The number's 810-208-1854. A couple other contracts that I wanted to laugh about with you. Roberto Luongo, 12 years, $64 million. He signed that deal when he was relatively young, though, so I guess I don't hate that contract because he could very well play 12 years. He could play out the duration of that contract. Marian Hossa, 12 years at $63.3 million. That's kind of absurd. I don't think Hossa's going to play 12 more years in the league, especially when he's jumped ship from franchise to franchise like he did with Atlanta and Pittsburgh and Detroit and now Chicago.
Yeah.
Mark Savard signed a 7-year, $28 million deal with the Bruins. Mark Savard is in his mid-30s. According to Brooks on Deadspin, or not Deadspin rather, but Puck Daddy on Yahoo.com, these contracts would be accepted in the NHLPA if they accept these terms. Okay, and we talked about this a little bit. We touched on these subjects. One, that the cap hit on future multi-year contracts will not count any seasons that end with a player over 40 years of age. Because 40 is sort of the benchmark, I guess, in most sports. Like, if you're over 40 and still playing, you're an anomaly.
Yeah.
The cap hit would be calculated on the average of the salary up through age 40 only, so you can't front-load these contracts. And number two, that the cap hit on future contracts longer than 5 years will be calculated under a different formula, granting additional weight to the 5 years with the highest salary. Is that good for the game, that you're not paying your pros a lot of money? Because other sports do that. I mean, look at Kobe Bryant, and Derek Jeter's now making a fuss with the Yankees, saying he wants, quote-unquote, A-Rod money. Show me the money, Mikey.
Yeah, but these other major sports bring in lots of money. The NHL isn't that league anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're not that league that's going to generate a lot of TV revenue or merchandise revenue or all those other things. They have to wait a few years, maybe just do what's good for the game right now and then come back later to that.
Barry Melrose has had a big problem, or not Barry Melrose rather, but Gary Bettman has had a big problem with contractions since he started moving teams out to the West Coast. Teams like Phoenix, playing in the desert. Do you think he sort of needs to swallow his pride a bit and say, you know what, we just need a smaller league?
Yeah, you do need a smaller league. You'd have a higher quality of players on the teams that are already established. You have a lot of people that, it would take, I think the revenue would go up for most of the other teams.
I'm sure.
The league would be better overall. There'd be a better quality of player too, and you just can't follow that many NHL teams. You can't get excited about some of these West Coast teams because those fans aren't. When you watch a game and there's
they're bandwagon fans for the most part.
Yeah, when you see 100 fans.
Well, okay, the attendance isn't that bad, but another team that could be contracted. I read about this the other day. The Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers, I don't think anybody would really miss, including people in Florida, as well as the Tampa Bay Lightning. Why Florida has 2 hockey teams, I have really no idea.
Yeah.
Florida Panthers have announced that this season they will be using tarps to cover the upper deck of their stadium. If I read it correctly, I believe they have somewhere in between 18 and 19,000 seating capacity at their arena. They averaged a little over 13,000 in attendance last season. So what they're doing is they're taking big tarps and putting them over the upper deck seats, and they're selling the tarps for advertisement space.
Sweet.
So an extra way to bring in money.
That's a good idea.
The one sponsor they've secured so far, Party City. Party City, which
That's
is
sweet.
a party
Like the
supply
tarp
store.
maker.
What's that?
How about the tarp maker?
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, if you're selling tarp advertising space to tarp making companies, I think it's time to fold the
That's a
NHL.
quality tarp. Let's get on, because we don't have much time left in the show. Let's talk about Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah,
'cause I
that's the
think
one other
gonna-
thing I wanted to touch on. We've got maybe 10 minutes and change, 13 minutes left in this show. We wanted to talk about this for some time. We brought it up in brief last week. Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL, is lobbying to Roger Goodell to get his suspension reduced from a possible 46 games to 3 games. For those of you who don't know, Ben Roethlisberger has been involved in a couple. Is rape too strong of a word?
Yeah, probably.
Sexual assault
Sexual assault.
style cases.
Yeah.
Where Ben Roethlisberger was accused of one in Nevada and the other. Where's the other one?
So Ohio, like a college in Ohio somewhere.
Yeah, he's
smaller?
crossing state boundaries to sexually
He was
assault
at
women.
A bar near a college. It was a college woman, but yeah,
He has, according to some reports, exposed himself to women.
there's a lot of reports of that.
Forced himself. They also said he has a gray penis.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm not sure how that happens.
Yeah,
Maybe whatever's infected your computer has infected Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah,
Anyway,
probably.
he also has been accused of assaulting women in the bathroom, forcing them to perform various acts on the bathroom floor and in stalls and things like that. Essentially just dirty, filthy, despicable behavior.
Mm-hmm.
No charges have been filed against Ben Roethlisberger. No convictions have come down. Roger Goodell, in his strict disciplinary policy in the NFL, has announced that he will be suspended from 4 to 6 games to start the season due to conduct detrimental to the NFL. Does Ben Roethlisberger deserve to be suspended
Yes.
for something that he has not been accused or has not been charged or convicted of doing?
When you're a public figure like that, you have certain responsibilities, and one of them is to live up to a higher morale, to be a role model. And that might, people might not like the fact that athletes are role models, but a lot of people look up to him.
Mm-hmm.
He's also part of a business, and that business doesn't want their employees going off doing these terrible things and putting themselves in stupid situations. So, yeah, I think he should be suspended. He's making the league look bad. He's making his team look bad. And he's making some really poor decisions that he needs to stop right now so they don't continue in the future.
Ben Roethlisberger has sort of had a history of bad decision-making.
Yeah.
He had a motorcycle accident a couple of years
That
ago
was
where he wasn't
really
wearing a helmet,
stupid.
and he missed a huge portion of the season because, he was severely injured.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of things that make him seem like he doesn't realize how great he has it. How great he has it. I mean, he's a $1 million athlete. He's got endorsements. He's got a lot of people that like him in Pittsburgh. He's got a fan base behind him that's always rooting for him. Even now they're rooting for him, and they still like him for whatever reason. But he's putting himself at risk for all these bad things to happen to him. When you can give up on some of these more carnal pleasures and, focus on what your real job is as a role model, as a professional athlete. That's what you need to focus on. You can't put yourself out in the public like this and expect it to go well. Even if he didn't do what he did, by putting yourself in that situation, a lot of people are going to think like maybe he did it, or they're going to talk, or they're going to try to get him in trouble because it's Ben Roethlisberger.
In this TMZ era of sports news, you really have to watch yourself. And this is a guy, like we said, with repeat offenses. I was wrong in saying he missed time because of that motorcycle accident, but in 2006, he was involved in a motorcycle accident where he wasn't wearing a helmet, and he didn't have a valid Pennsylvania motorcycle license at the time of the accident. He broke his jaw, he broke his nose, his face was all screwed up, but he did end up making it back for the beginning of the NFL season. So this is strike one against him. I mean, that's just something stupid.
Yeah, very stupid.
You're at the beginning of an NFL season. I think it was right around the time training camp was starting, and you're going to go out and ride a motorcycle without a helmet, without a license.
Yeah.
And you're going to expect that everything's going to be fine. That's for me, that's a guy that doesn't deserve to be the face of an NHL or an NFL franchise because he's so full of himself. He thinks it's about me, it's about him, it's about him. And you know what? Maybe if that's the only thing he ever did, I wouldn't be hating on Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, because then he's young and he made a stupid mistake.
And
he
he'll learn
realized,
from it.
But he hasn't learned from it. He keeps repeating the same mistakes.
On
over
July
and over again.
17th, 2009, a civil suit was filed in Washoe County, Nevada District Court accusing Roethlisberger of sexually assaulting one Miss Andrea McNulty in June 2008 in his hotel room while he was in Lake Tahoe for a celebrity golf tournament. McNulty didn't file a criminal complaint. No physical evidence like semen was collected. Roethlisberger's attorney denied the claim and seeks over $400,000 in damages. That was situation number one.
And people even gave him the benefit of the doubt. Well, no, this woman's...
Maybe
Yeah.
she's just talking.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's just, money and stuff like that. But when you get another incident like this, that's when you think there's something up.
This sort of brings up shadows of the Duke lacrosse case a couple of years ago where everyone jumped on these Duke lacrosse players and said, rape, 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 when it turns out the woman was lying and all the Duke players were acquitted. So people were a little hesitant to jump on another sexual assault case and just demonize Ben Roethlisberger. Less than a month later, in an affidavit obtained by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Andrea McNulty allegedly bragged to a coworker about having consensual sex with Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, let's leave him be. Until a year later, March 5th, 2010, it was revealed that police in Milledgeville, Georgia, was investigating Roethlisberger for an unrelated sexual assault inside the women's restroom of a capital city nightclub. The accuser, a then 20-year-old student at nearby Georgia College and State University, was seen at several establishments with Roethlisberger. If I remember, she was following him around from bar to bar. There was some sort of crawl in Milledgeville, Georgia. Roethlisberger spoke with police the night of the incident, stated he did not have contact with the woman. That was not consummated, and afterward the accuser slipped and injured her head. John got a good laugh out of that.
You fell down the stairs.
You tell him
You're
you
so
fell.
clumsy.
I was just gonna say it's totally not sportsmanlike to actually, cruise the women's restroom either.
Right, yeah.
Wait for them to be out free in the open. You know?
Yeah.
A rape kit was collected from the scene. She had a superficial laceration and bruising and a slight bleeding in the genital area. The doctor's report then also quoted the alleged victim telling them, quote, "A boy kind of raped me."
I don't. Yeah.
The victim claims Roethlisberger had sex with her after luring her in the bathroom and exposing himself. The policeman...
He's had a history of that. He exposes himself to a lot of people. I don't know how he gets his rocks off that way, but he does.
We have like 5 minutes left in the show, but if there's a woman listening out there, could you call in and tell us if it's a cool thing when a guy like flashes his junk to you? Like, do women really get off on that?
I don't think so. It's pretty ugly down there.
If I were a woman, I would not want to see some random dude's penis.
Yeah,
like, that
especially if
doesn't
it's
sound
gray,
cool.
like Ben Roethlisberger's. I mean, who would want to see a gray penis?
They're saying that they can't prove guilt beyond a relative doubt.
See, yeah, that's something with the legal system to figure out. But if we're just talking about sports and suspensions, he deserves to be suspended. He's making too many stupid mistakes.
And it's sort of...
But is this going to really stop anything? I mean, is he really going to be like, oh, okay, I'm suspended 4 games?
It's sort of been consumed by pop culture, though. You know, they referenced it on South Park, and Eminem had a song on his new album, Recovery. He has a line that says, quote, "I stuck my dick in this game like a rapist. Call me Slim Roethlisberger."
Oh, God.
Or Rapelessberger, as we like to call him. The problem I have with this is you give a guy the benefit of a doubt because he's a big, high-profile athlete. So the motorcycle thing, he's young and stupid. Okay, you know what? He'll be all right. Alleged rape. Well, let's not judge him just yet. Maybe he's not guilty. Alleged rape number 2. A boy kind of raped me. Where do you stop giving him the benefit of doubt and you say, you know what? You have a problem. You don't belong in this league. You don't belong in the spotlight. You don't belong in the fat head on my wall. You don't belong anywhere in my life or on my television set. You are sick son of a bitch. You're a human being. Get out of here.
If the fact that he's asking for his suspension to be reduced when he's already made so many mistakes, he should just say, you know what? I deserve this. I probably deserve more. I'm probably being pretty, lenient here.
That's another big point of contention is that Roethlisberger initially came out in the public eye and said, you know what, Roger Goodell, 6 games, I'm fine with that. I deserve it. That's cool. So maybe he got a little bit of clout back from the fans, from the followers of the game. And now the NFL schedule comes down. Guess who they're playing in week 4, Mike?
Division rivals.
The Baltimore Ravens, their division rivals, the biggest game on their schedule every season. And Roethlisberger suddenly decides that 4 to 6 games is way too much. He needs that suspension at 3 games. And so he's going to go lobby to Roger Goodell to get his suspension reduced to 3 games. So, coincidentally, he gets to take on Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens in week 4 of the season. Is that not the same selfish behavior that got his stupid ass in the situation in the first place?
Yeah. He needs to realize and take his licks. He's already not getting enough licks, really. He deserves a lot bigger punishment than he's getting for the things that he has done. But he's getting all this leniency because he's Ben Roethlisberger, because I don't know why.
Let's say Ben Roethlisberger comes back after a 4 to 6 game suspension or 3 game suspension if Roger Goodell for some reason gives him his way. He has a good season, he stays out of trouble, and he comes back next year and there's another rape allegation. What do you do? If you're Roger Goodell, if you're Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, if you are a Pittsburgh Steelers player.
You blacklist them. You say... You
Is it the 4-strike policy with Roethlisberger? 3 strikes and you're not out? Whatever happened,
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that golden rule?
Yeah, I'd cut him, and then I don't think any other NFL teams would touch him.
The Bengals would touch him. If Carson Palmer went down with an injury, the Bengals would sign him.
That's true.
The Bengals have a history of signing players with legal troubles. Do you blacklist him at that point? You say, you know what, go to the USFL, we're done with you.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I'd kick him out of the league.
I think maybe now's that time to kick him out of the league.
Nah.
I mean,
No.
whether he's guilty or not, for me, is sort of irrelevant. I think just because he's putting himself in these situations, that's enough for me to say, you know what, you're not the type of character guy we run around
I
here.
understand that, yeah.
And that brings up, character's a big part of professional sports. We're running out of time here, but I wanted to talk real quick. Vernon Davis, who's the tight end for the San Francisco 49ers, just got into a sort of an argument with Michael Crabtree, this sort of holier-than-thou wide receiver that held out half of last season and cost the 49ers a playoff berth. This is the same sort of athlete head case issue that we've been talking about for 2 hours on this show, where these college athletes are accepting money, maybe under the table, getting paid. They get kind of high on themselves, and they end up in these situations where they're hurting their team because of their sort of idea of themselves. I understand. And this is the same thing with Roethlisberger. And I sort of wish him luck, and I hope that something good happens with him and he turns himself around and everything is all right.
I doubt that'll happen.
That's about it for the show this week, guys. We're going to debut in this time slot from here on out for as long as we can foretell. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., 2-hour Unsportsmanlike Conduct show. I'm Paul Gerke. That's Mike McManaman. You can comment on the Facebook, get in on the discussion every week, flinttalkradio.com. Thanks for listening. You have a good one.